Got a question about the law? Well, now's your chance, North Texas. Get ready to Ask the Lawyer.
Good afternoon and welcome to Ask the Lawyer. I'm your host, Brenda Keel. Our guest today has been an attorney in Texas for 14 years and is the author of End Your IRS Problems. Nick Namath, welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about your practice.
Well, I have been a licensed attorney in the state of Texas for 14 years now, like you said, and my practice is very narrow. I strictly focus on helping people with IRS debt. You owe a bunch of money to the government, you're not able to write them a check, that's where we come in.
So who's your typical client?
I don't think there is a typical client. We run the gamut. Doctors, lawyers, plumbers, electricians, blue collar, white collar, self-employed individuals, employees, payroll tax issues, personal tax issues. We have a wide range of clients that we can help.
Some people may not know the difference between payroll taxes and personal taxes. Would you explain, please?
Good question. Personal taxes is your annual Form 1040 that you start stressing about in January or February. That's due in April. When you don't pay in enough tax at your job or you're self-employed and you don't make your tax payments on your own, that's a personal tax issue. Payroll taxes are a completely different game. It's where an employer has problems. As if you were to work for me, I would pay you a check every 2 weeks. I take out the taxes, the withholding, and then my duty is to turn it over to the IRS. If I don't do that, my company is now liable for those payroll tax issues, and in my line of work, I would then represent that company.
All right. We are taking your phone calls today. If you have a specific question about the IRS, then give us a call right now. Nick is here to answer your question, and this is your specialty. That's what you like to focus on, and that's what he does the best. So we've compiled a list of commonly asked tax questions that, Nick, you've been asked over the years. Let's start off with this one because this may be your question at home as well. It is. My husband and I owe several $1,000s in back taxes. I see several commercials for tax resolution centers on television. Is that a good idea? What do you think, Nick?
Brenda, be very careful when you're considering hiring these national companies. I call them the 800s. Even though I have an 800 toll-free number, I call them the 800s. You want to stick with somebody local. The reason I know this is probably about 20 or 25% of the people that come to my office that eventually retain us have spent thousands of dollars with these other companies. Literally 20 to 25% of these people that come to me. And they really couldn't get anything done. A wage levy might come into effect, and then they call to try and get some help from these companies that are supposedly representing them. They can't get a call back. Then you're not able to go to their office, obviously, if they're located in another state. So I tell people to focus on three things when you're considering hiring somebody. Get somebody local. Make sure you get a licensed attorney in the state of Texas, and get a flat fee. A lot of attorneys charge hourly, and these companies have creative ways of billing you. So make sure you get a flat fee. Also, do your due diligence, do your homework. Anybody you're considering hiring, make sure that they've got a good rating with the Better Business Bureau. Use Google. Put their name in Google, follow it by the word complaint or lawsuit, and just see what information is out there.
So if you do call one of the 800s, if you will, ask them specifically, do you have an attorney on staff?
That's a good question, but again, if they're located in California or North Carolina, then it may not be the right attorney for you.
But it's federal.
It's federal. You're exactly right. They can represent you, and also a non-attorney can represent you. You don't have to be an attorney to represent somebody in front of the IRS. What you need to be is either an attorney or a CPA or what's called an enrolled agent. So if you wanted to do what I do, you could go take a test with the IRS, get your enrolled agent license, and now you could represent people as well. I think people are better served by getting a licensed attorney.
I see. Another question that you probably get a lot, Nick, is this one. A lot of people want to know if they can go to jail for not paying their taxes. What do you tell them?
I get asked that question every single person that comes into my office. The answer, the way you worded it, is no. You cannot go to jail for owing the government, whether it's $10,000, $100,000, or $1 million. You do go to jail, however, for not filing your tax returns. The crime is failure to file, not failure to pay.
I see.
So if you file accurate returns, make sure you get the word accurate in there, not fraudulent. But if you file accurate returns, you do not go to jail.
All right. File your tax return. Got another one for you that you do get a lot as well. This one is like this. It says, I owe back taxes and have not been able to come to a resolution with the IRS. Can the IRS take my house and car and garnish my wages?
The answer is yes. My general rule is if you have access to something, the IRS has access to it. So take a 401k, a retirement plan of some sort. You can generally go and liquidate that. And if you can, the IRS can do it for you if they wanted to. They can seize your home. They can take cars and boats. They can even access cash value of life insurance policies. So the government is powerful, and you're picking an opponent here that makes the rules. So you know all those rules are stacked in their favor.
Can you work out P&I within penalties and interest?
Sometimes you can. First of all, interest is the harder one. You can never get interest abated unless you generally have relied on written erroneous information from the IRS. You don't see that very often.
Okay. We've talked to some folks before who have said you can stop the IRS from calling you over and over and over again. Is that true?
I'm not sure the answer to that question is yes. The IRS can do whatever they want, generally within the confines of the code. And again, the opponent here wrote the rules. They wrote the code. So I think asking them to stop calling is not going to accomplish anything. I think the smarter thing to do if you're getting bombarded from a revenue officer or from some sort of IRS official is to contact somebody like us that can provide the representation and has the knowledge to answer the questions the IRS is going to want to answer.
Nick, I've got a final question for you before we take our break. Can you roll your IRS debt into a bankruptcy?
Sometimes well, there's two types of bankruptcy that we have to address really quickly. The first one is a Chapter 7, a full discharge, where you go to the bankruptcy courts, within a few months your unsecured debt is gone. IRS debt can go away in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy if, always an if it meets certain criteria. So a lot of times a bankruptcy can be part of this IRS debt solution process. The other type of bankruptcy is a repayment type of bankruptcy, and in that case, the IRS debt will always be rolled into that repayment plan through the Chapter 13 bankruptcy, yes.
Okay. All right, got a question for you that you have often answered. This one has to do with the wage levy. The woman says that her employer has just received a wage levy notice saying that the IRS is going to take her paycheck starting next week. Is there anything that she can do to stop it?
Yes, there is. A lot of people come to me when they've waited just a little bit too late, like this lady. Sometimes we can get the wage levies released very quickly. A phone call, take one or two steps, and we can get it released, at least temporarily. And now at least you can survive. You can put food on the table. Sometimes it's a long, drawn-out process, which we'll talk about in a second. My advice to people that haven't reached this yet, fix the problem before you get to that point, because it's very difficult once 80% or 90% of your paycheck is being garnished. Now, it's a step-by-step process. There's certain things we have to make sure we do in order to get that levy released. You have to make sure all the returns are filed, and then we ask to get the levy released at that point. Sometimes they're going to want detailed financial information. So we know how to maneuver this kind of a situation to be able to release that levy as quickly as possible, but sometimes it can be a slow process.
Oh, my goodness. Also in your book, End Your IRS Problems, you say that it's good to be broke. Why do you say that?
Well, one of the ways, let me rephrase that. All of the ways of solving IRS problems are basically based on your ability to pay. And even if you are not broke and you have assets and you have a good income, there's still creative ways of finding a manageable solution. But if you are broke and you don't have a lot of assets and you're a hardworking person that lives paycheck to paycheck like most of America, then some of the better solutions come up that are available to the taxpayer.
All right, the number to call is on your screen. Give us a call if you have an IRS question. We have a caller on the line right now. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, I was going to ask about, I'm 68 and I haven't filed for a few years, and I wondered, do I have to file every year or not? Income tax?
Okay, thank you, S. Antonio calling. 68 years old. Does he have to file every year?
Well, I would have 10 questions for him before I could answer that question. If he has a filing requirement, if he's earned an income, even if he's on Social Security and has some other type of passive income like a retirement, that Social Security income might become taxable. So my answer, like we talked about earlier in the program, is file the return. If you don't owe anything, then no big deal. But if you do owe something, you're not letting a problem snowball year after year after year.
And again, file something and let the IRS tell you that you don't need to file.
It's not bad advice.
Yeah, otherwise you're in trouble and you're getting the notices that you don't want. We are talking about tax issues today on Ask the Lawyer. Nick Namath is joining us to answer your questions. Here's another question for you that you have heard, I'm sure, quite a bit. It says, I recently found out that my wife and I owe for the tax years 2006 and 7. Will we also be charged penalties and interest? And if so, is there any way that those can be removed? We touched on this a little bit earlier.
Yes, we did. There is something that you can do when you find out you owe a debt to the IRS. And I'm going to take a little aside, and there's 5 ways we normally solve any of these problems. Sometimes you need to just simply pay it. Sometimes that's the smartest thing if it's possible. Sometimes we do an installment agreement, a payment plan. Sometimes we can reduce the debt drastically. Sometimes we can reduce it a little bit. Sometimes we can reduce it by talking about the penalties and interest. We talked about the interest earlier. Penalties can be removed, abated, the government calls it, if you have reasonable cause. Now, your definition and my definition of reasonable cause might not be the same as the government.
Well, you just said it's good to be broke.
It's good to be broke. That's exactly
Is
right.
that a good
But that's
reason?
not reasonable cause to have the penalties abated. Sometimes if you have a type of a story where your spouse got diagnosed with terminal cancer and you didn't have health insurance and you had to work 2 jobs and you didn't really worry about paying in your quarterly tax payments, sometimes with stories like that, we can go to the government and say, can we do something about these penalties? You have to have it really wasn't my fault story. And if you do, penalties can be removed.
All right. You're watching Ask the Lawyer with Nick Namath here. If you have a question for Nick, give us a call now. Welcome back to Ask the Lawyer. I'm your host, Brenda Teal. Here to answer your tax question today is attorney Nick Namath, author of End Your IRS Problems. Just call the number that you see on your screen. Nick, I have a question for you. What does your team do if I come to you or if someone comes to you with a tax issue and they've been putting it off for years? How does your team go to work?
Well, it's almost an identical process for every client, regardless of how different the case is. We have a checklist. Lawyers love checklists, you know that. And we go through this sequence. The first thing we want to do is make sure we keep the government at bay. We call the government and we say, don't do anything. Don't do anything drastic. Don't take any more collection activity. The taxpayer wants to fix this. I think that gives the client peace of mind within 24 hours of them retaining us. The next thing we do is we have to go that sequence of making sure everything is in order. Get the tax returns filed. Make sure you have enough withholding. A lot of people get their paycheck, they see money coming out for taxes, but mysteriously every year in April when they file the return they owe $2,000 or $20,000. It just means you're simply not having enough withholding. And I'm never going to be able to fix a problem in the past if you continue to be a problem every year. So again, make sure the returns are filed, make sure you have enough withholding. The next thing we want to do is go through a detailed financial analysis. Earlier in the show, we talked about the solutions we use are based on ability to pay. We're going to need a profit and loss statement for the client's home. How much is coming in? How much is going out? Where is the money going? Because a lot of people think they're broke at the end of the month because they're paying their mortgage, they're paying their 2 cars, their child's private school, food, clothing, sports, entertainment, all the rest of it. The difference is when the government looks at that, they're going to pull out their red pen and they're going to X through this, this, and this. They call them non-allowable expenses, and they may think that you can spend a lot more money to repay this debt than you really can. And once we have that financial statement, now we can go back to those various ways we solve these problems and try and see what's applicable to you.
We have a call on the line right now, but very quickly, Nick, how long does it usually take to resolve something like this?
My average case takes about 9 to 12 months. It's not a quick process. Some cases, 2 or 3 months, we're done. Some cases, 2 years, we're still very good friends with our client.
Okay, but that's good.
Yeah.
Lynn from Dallas has a question. Lynette, go ahead.
Can IRS take your Social Security disability from back taxes?
We do have some good questions for you
That's a great
today.
question. The answer is yes. Anytime you get income, whether it's Social Security or Social Security disability or a VA pension, anytime Uncle Sam is signing that check, you can be sure they can garnish that, and they can garnish it very easily. They're the ones giving you that money. So the answer is yes.
All right. Thanks, Lynette. Sorry for the answer there. I'm sure a lot of people come to you and, well, after they realize that an IRS debt just doesn't go away, does it?
Yes and no. Typical lawyer answer. The IRS debt will expire 10 years from the time it was assessed.
Really?
So if you file a tax return in 2002, you filed it in 2003 for tax year 2002. In 2013, technically it'll fall off the books. It's called the collection statute expiration date. Now, they can make you very miserable for those 10 years. So you got to be careful using that into your solution process. But also, there's a lot of things that stop that 10-year period from ticking. So filing different types of applications with the IRS or filing a bankruptcy that takes you a year, it'll stop that clock from ticking for that period. So that 10-year period can grow to an 11, a 12, 13, 14. But eventually it will expire, yes.
So you're saying if you file a bankruptcy, it just puts the time on the back end of that 10 years?
That is correct. If the debt isn't dischargeable in the bankruptcy, yes.
Wow. All right. So, again, work through it. So the real answer is no, it really doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away, but some people do get lucky. I just wouldn't put that into your strategy of solving your IRS problem. They just might ignore me for 10 years.
Will the debt be left behind for my heirs? Will the heirs inherit that debt?
It's not so much the heirs. If a federal tax lien is filed on your assets, then that will follow the asset. The lien will follow the assets to the heirs. So it is a concern. Don't think I'm going to die, my family's going to get what I own, and the IRS goes away. Some of those tax debts are attached to the assets that you might want to leave your family.
So only the assets that you leave to the family, that you will to them. But also, if you have a home that you own, the IRS will step in and take that too.
They may. That's correct.
You may have wanted your children to get that, and it may even be in the will, but the IRS says, sorry, it's ours first.
That's correct. If a federal tax lien has been filed on your IRS debt, it will attach to your property.
Some people may not understand what a federal tax lien is exactly.
Well, let's talk about that. A federal tax lien is a way the government secures themselves to make sure you don't go sell everything you have and move to Canada or to Mexico. If you wanted to sell your house and a federal tax lien is filed against you and you would get, say, $40,000 in equity out of your home, but you owe the government $100,000, guess where the 40 goes?
Any penny that you should have given to the IRS, they will collect some way or another.
That's correct. They'll find a way to do it.
Very good. Give us a call with your question and we'll try and give you an answer. You're watching Ask the Lawyer. Be right back. Welcome back to Ask the Lawyer. I'm your host, Brenda Teal. We've been answering your tax questions today with attorney Nick Namath, author of End Your IRS Problems. Now, Nick, this is not available in bookstores or anything like that or online. This is something that you give to your clients to walk them through the process.
That's correct. We use it as a tool for people that come into our office, whether they hire us or not, to help them understand how the process works.
A lot of commonly asked questions right here, and appreciate you talking to us today.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us and asking your questions here.